Well, this roller coaster of a season continues as your Minnesota Twins are now on a 3-game losing streak. We'll talk about it on the Twinkie Town Tavern. Well, hello and welcome to the Twinkie Town Tavern, where the beer is always cold, the Twins talk is always hot, and the stools are always open. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, inviting you to grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's talk about the Minnesota Twins losing their series opener to the Kansas City Royals 8-2 on Tuesday. Here's how it happened. The Minnesota Twins are making Randy Dobnak look like Randy Johnson after getting shut down for the second straight start against him. Meanwhile, Joe Ryan's collapse is continuing. He gives up a ton of hard contact throughout the first inning, culminating in a Salvador Perez sacrifice fly and a Michael Massey RBI double to put Kansas City up 2-0. The Twins finally break through against the Big Uber during the fourth inning when Cody Clemens scores on Alan Rodin's sacrifice fly, but Joe Ryan implodes once again in the fifth. Bobby Witt has a 2-run double in the frame, and Jack Caglione drives in another run on a fielder's choice. Ryan finishes the game giving up 4 earned runs and 1 unearned run on 7 hits and 2 walks while striking out 3 in 5 1/3 innings of work. Josh Bell adds a home run in the top of the 8th to get Minnesota within 3, but Kansas City breaks it open with Starling Marte's 2-run double against Taylor Rogers and then Kyle Isbell's immediate RBI single right after that. Twins lose 8-2 to drop to 56 and 58. They're in 3rd place in the AL Central, just 4 games behind Chicago, and they're just a game behind Cleveland for the final AL wildcard spot. Let's get into it here on the Twinkie Town Tavern. We are a part of the Grey Duck Sports Network, and you can follow us on Twitter and YouTube at Grey Duck Sports, and we're on TikTok at grey.duck.sports. There you can find all of our podcasts, as well as clips from our podcasts, not only the Twinkie Town Tavern, but the Grey Duck NFL Show and the Vibe of the Vikings, as well as different stories and series that we're working on pertaining to the history of Minnesota sports and the history of the NFL. That, again, is on our social media platforms, which is Twitter at Grey Duck Sports. That's also the same on YouTube. And then we are at grey.duck.sports on TikTok. Well, it is time to get a little bit upset, and I think rightfully so, after kind of a more joyous trade deadline on Monday and over the weekend, where the Minnesota Twins finally made some buying moves for the first time in almost 5 years, and made like competent and competitive deadline moves for the first time in 5 years, I should say, not just bringing in that no-name reliever from the Toronto Blue Jays, who I can't even remember anymore, that was off of the team less than a month after the Twins traded for him on the trade deadline like they did in 2024. We had the joy of finally getting we thought that part of the era of Twins history, the right-sizing era. And then we have a game like this. And the good news is, the only silver lining from this game is that both Chicago and Cleveland lost yesterday. But now all of a sudden, the Detroit Tigers, despite selling their 2 best starting pitchers, probably their only 2 starting pitchers, are now just a half game behind the Minnesota Twins. And we have to worry about them, despite them being a god-awful team throughout most of this season, and now having none of their good players still on the squad. So even with the silver linings, there are caveats to that silver lining, and it is getting very frustrating, not just because the Minnesota Twins lost this game, and you're going to lose 60-plus games every single year. You have to prepare yourself as a fan for that, but it is because a trend that is continuing now for some of these Twins players and some of these Twins hitters that is not conducive to success down the stretch, and it's certainly not conducive to postseason success if we are even able to get there. And the main trend that I'm talking about is the absolute fall off of Joe Ryan. He is broken, and I'm not sure how to fix him. We mentioned the line. It's his 8th loss of the season, but I'll go over it one more time. 5 1/3 innings, he gives up 4 earned runs, 1 unearned run, strikes out just 3, walks 2. Nothing is going right for Joe Ryan at this moment. And even the peripheral stats are starting to falter significantly. When you look at the MLB Pitch Profiler website and look at the Stuff Plus ratings for all of Joe Ryan's pitches, the only one that is a bit above the 100 average at 101 is his knuckle curve. That is the only pitch right now for a pitcher that throws 5 to 6 pitches that is above average. And because of that, he's using his fastball a lot less. And when he's using his fastball a lot less, he's not the same pitcher that we are typically used to seeing in the first half of the season. Right now, his fastball yesterday averaged 92.2 miles per hour, which is 2 to 3 miles per hour down from his league average, from his season average, which sometimes can indicate that you are harboring an injury, and we'll get into that in just a second. But since the All-Star break, since Joe Ryan pitched in his second straight All-Star game, the numbers on him have been completely pear-shaped. He's 0-3 in 3 starts, 15 1/3 innings of work, 16 earned runs, just 10 strikeouts, the 2 walks, and a 9.39 ERA. And the teams with the vaunted lineups that he is going up against are the Cleveland Guardians. Ooh, and then the Kansas City Royals in back-to-back performances. One of those performances when they didn't even have Bobby Witt. Now, Bobby Witt returned yesterday from the injured list to the Kansas City Royals starting lineup, and he had a good game. So maybe you can forgive Joe Ryan just a little bit for that. But overall, over the last 3 starts against below-average offenses in Major League Baseball, Joe Ryan has looked like Joe Nobody. And it is an absolute shame because there are 3 different reasons why he could be performing this poorly, why his velocity could be falling off as much as we've seen it fall off, and none of them are giving any sense of optimism for the rest of this Twins season for your number 1 pitcher. Number 1, he's injured and hiding it, which for me probably seems like the most plausible. And yesterday when he was talking to Dan Hayes, and there's an article on The Athletic about it right now, he says that he doesn't feel like he's at 100%. He feels like his mechanics are a little bit off and that he can't execute his mechanics from a pitch-to-pitch basis. So that to me means, again, Joe Ryan probably harboring an injury now for the second or third time in 3 to 4 years that he has hid an injury from the Twins training staff, which is absolutely unacceptable. We are talking about a 30-year-old man who does not have to be playing this immature Joe Ryan experience sort of pitcher to hide injuries from his training staff. He knows in the past how much that has hurt the chances of the Minnesota Twins. He's been shut down because of it. And if he is continuing to have those sorts of, wear and tear injuries throughout the season and once again hiding him from the staff, then that's a big conversation that you have to have with him from a front office all the way down. The front office needs to talk to him. The managers need to talk to him because he needs to be honest about his health, because we are in a playoff race and his subpar pitching right now is ruining our chances of getting to the postseason. So Joe Ryan, if you are injured, fucking tell somebody because it's getting ridiculous at this point. Number 2. The other reason why he could be performing so poorly is his endurance is running out. And there are 2 reasons that could be the case. One, our training staff just doesn't have a good endurance training program. And with the staff and injury staff that we've kind of gone through over the last decade of Twins baseball, where seemingly minor injuries all of a sudden turn into injuries that are much more major through poor rehabilitation process or through poor diagnosis in the first place, that would also not surprise me if we just have a bad endurance staff, a bad training staff that can't help train your ace pitcher's endurance to last throughout a 162 game season, to get him past, after he gets through the first 120 innings, to make sure he doesn't just become this giant pumpkin when he gets to innings 120 through 170 throughout the rest of the season, because this has happened now on a consistent basis, not just this year, but in every one of Joe Ryan's seasons, save for the 2021 when his only action with the Twins came after the All-Star break. Anyway, every single year with the Twins, post All-Star break, Joe Ryan has turned into a number 5, if even that, a starting pitcher in this rotation, and he has taken that turn once again. So if this is just a continued trend of the training staff not being able to work up their pitchers to good endurance levels in order to last throughout the whole season, which every other team is seemingly able to do, then you need to fire every single person on that training staff, because that is complete and utter incompetence. I don't care if they were just rehired after firing a staff 2 or 3 years ago. Get rid of them. Get them out of the clubhouse. If they can't get our major league pitchers, our ace pitcher in particular, up to a point where he can make it throughout the course of a major league season. And then the third potential option, again, none of these are going to be sugar-coated, none of these have any silver lining attached to them, is that the endurance plan is good. The Twins have looked it over. All their other pitchers are able to follow their endurance plan and stay at tip-top shape throughout the course of the season, and it's just Joe Ryan, either through sure will or just ability, lack of each, lack of one or lack of the other or lack of both, him not being able to complete in endurance training and just not being able to be a pitcher that lasts throughout the course of a whole 162-game season, where the first 20 starts he'll look great, and the next 12 he will look like, I don't know, like, remember when Sidney Ponson was here for the Minnesota Twins for a short stay and was just probably the worst pitcher, the worst starting pitcher in Minnesota Twins history? He looks like Sidney Ponson. Now, not as plump as Sidney Ponson was, but that is the sort of numbers that we're getting from Joe Ryan right now in these, typically final 12 starts of the season. And if Joe Ryan is just not that guy, he can be an ace for the first half of the season, and then he can't for the second half consistently, then he's not an ace. Then he's not a pitcher you can have on your team moving forward. And I understand and would agree with not trading him at the trade deadline because you were in a buying position, and it would have been silly to trade away Joe Ryan. But if this trend continues and Joe Ryan looks like absolute horseshit for the next 2 months, then he needs to be shopped during the off season. And I know the off season and the schedule of it and everything that is around it is all up in the air because of the collective bargaining agreement. But as soon as you can trade Joe Ryan, then you must trade Joe Ryan. And, Pablo Lopez will be back next year. Mick Abel will be back. Hopefully those guys can show that they can go a full 32 starts, because Joe Ryan right now does not have it, and I'm not sure he ever has, and I'm not sure he ever will. But it needs to get better, because even if you get to the playoffs, if your number one pitcher pitches like Joe Ryan is right now with a 9.39 ERA since the All-Star break, you are not going to win another game in the playoffs, and you might as well get the next 18-game postseason losing streak started, because that is what the Joe Ryan experience, if it continues down this path, will get you. Now, we've seen Joe Ryan be a competent pitcher when his fastball is good and when he's not hanging pitches all over the place. Let's hope he gets back to that. Maybe a trip on the 15-day injured list will give his arm the rest it needs to make it through the rest of the season at his ace-like level that he's been able to pitch at through every first half of the season that he's been with the Minnesota Twins. And if that is the case, then obviously you don't trade him. But if it is if it's not the case, if he comes back and he continues to look like this, then it is time to move on from the Joe Ryan experience. As sad as that may be for us that love Joe Ryan here in Twins territory and everything he's brought to the club over the past few years, he can't be a part of the future of this club. Even if he only has the 1 year remaining on the contract anyway, he can't be a part of next year's team if this is how he's going to pitch in the second half, even if he pitches as well as he did in the first half once again during the 2027 season. You just cannot have that pitcher on your roster because it is cancerous. And the priority needs to be trade him this offseason if things don't get better, and I see no reason to believe why they should get better based on his past history during these last couple of seasons in the second half. That is the first thing to be mad about from this Minnesota Twins team, is that either Joe Ryan is lying about an injury, either the training staff can't get it done, or Joe Ryan just really isn't that pitcher that we thought he was. The other thing to be absolutely red-handed about is Randy Dobnik getting Minnesota again and dominating Minnesota again. And the question there is how? How does this Uber driver, whose last win before these last two starts in Major League Baseball came in 2021, who in 2021 was so bad that the Twins took him off of their 40-man roster despite before the season having signed him to a 5-year guaranteed deal in which they were going to let $2 to $3 million every year waste away at AAA, and who never showed himself to be a competent pitcher even at the AAA level. All of a sudden, he comes up to the big leagues with the Royals and gets his first 2 wins since 2021 against his old team in back-to-back starts. It doesn't make sense. They're getting swings and misses. The Twins are somehow striking out against Randy Dobnik. I don't know how. It seems impossible. He's not a good pitcher. He's not a major league pitcher. He's not even a AAA pitcher. It's not as if his sinker, which has good movement, is being placed in a good spot, and that's why the Twins are getting so much weak contact against him. He is leaving that sinker up in the zone, Nick Blackburn 2010 style, and Twins hitters, for whatever reason, are not sitting on it and just ripping it. I don't understand it. This offense should be hammering Randy Dobnik, of all people. They should be putting Randy Dobnik into a permanent Uber representation status. He can go be the mascot for Uber. He can go drive for Uber. He should not be at the major league level, but the Twins are extending his career at the major league level anyway. The Twins offense, which is supposed to be one of the top in the American League, the numbers would say, for some reason, can't get it done against Randy Dobnik, of all people. And we are in the final stretch of the season. You cannot afford to fall asleep at the wheel right now. If both your ace pitcher and your complete offense are falling asleep at the wheel, then let's just move ahead to 2027 if there is a 2027 with all of the lockout talks. And there's no reason to even watch the rest of the 2026 season if this team cannot get it together with their star pitcher and with their offense, which had been so hot as of late. And yes, Byron Buxton's injured, and once he gets back, that'll help out this team a little bit more. But it's not as if there's a bunch of slouches in there right now. Trevor Larnach should be doing better. Royce Lewis had a good game. Josh Bell had a good game. That was it. Everybody else had a terrible game. Cody Clemens, Mr. Ultimate Grand Slam, who we sung the praises of just a couple of shows ago, he somehow swings and misses and gets struck out by Randy Dobnik. And I understand these are major league pitchers, and that happens in Major League Baseball. But once again, Randy Dobnik is not a major league pitcher. He looks like Tony Fiore for the Minnesota Twins back in 2002, who somehow got by with an 86-mile-per-hour fastball until he faced the Oakland A's in the playoffs and got absolutely leveled by them and showed that, oh, this actually isn't a major league pitcher. This is just a guy that is getting lucky like a major league pitcher. That is Randy Dobnik. And the Minnesota Twins are the team that is letting him get lucky at this moment. Minnesota Twins offense yesterday, their calling card has been their situational hitting. On Tuesday, they were 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position, and they left 9 men on base. And in bases loaded situations, they did drive in a run, but it was on a sacrifice fly, so they don't even get credit for... They do get credit for the bases loaded RBI, which again has already soared past the amount of total bases loaded RBI the Twins had throughout the 162-game 2025 season. They're already past that, but it doesn't help your on-base percentage in bases loaded situations. It doesn't help that 1 for 9 number with runners in scoring position. So it is a shame that they weren't able to get everything done, and hopefully it is just a small sample size, but it is now back-to-back starts where you haven't been able to get anything going against Randy Dobnik, and that is just as unacceptable as whatever is going on with Joe Ryan's noodle right arm right now. But that was the Minnesota Twins game, and for whatever reason, the Kansas City Royals, who are one of the worst teams in baseball, have given the Twins fits. This is a team that nearly swept the Twins had it not been for Royce Lewis's late-game heroics in Game 1 of that series and for Cody Clemens' late-game heroics in Game 3 of that series. They just barely won that series because the Royals by and large, dominated them. And now the Royals once again dominate the Minnesota Twins. And you cannot, when you have these easy series, which should be 2 wins, put down in Sharpie, put down in permanent ink, you cannot have games like that. I get that happens in baseball. Just because it does happen does not mean that it is acceptable. So this Twins team has to take a look in the mirror before these next 2 games against the Royals. They need to win those. I know it's not must win, and we're still only 1 game out of a playoff spot. I know in terms of that it's not must win, but if you want any confidence going forward, if you can't win a series against the Kansas City Royals post-deadline, then I don't know what we're doing. But that is what is ahead of us. What is also ahead of us in the further out future is an off season that we may be a little bit more excited to look forward to. Tom Pohlad yesterday spoke to reporters post-deadline. He is the chairman of the Minnesota Twins. He is the Pohlad in charge. The whole Pohlad family essentially owns the team, but Tom Pohlad is the guy making the decisions and being the spokesperson here in his first year after taking over for his brother, who was an embarrassment of a representative for both the Pohlad family and for the Minnesota Twins, with his decision to, with a smile on his face, decide to right-size the payroll, whatever that means. Well, the good news is that we are getting different words from Tom Pohlad, who says, I and we as an ownership group were committed to giving Jeremy Zoll the financial flexibility to make this team better. I think the results of what happened at the trade deadline were in no small part a function of having that financial flexibility and that clarity at the outset. Now, somebody has to go out and execute that, and that is a very hard thing to do, and he did that masterfully. Later on in the interview, he was asked if the moves for the trade deadline are an indicator that he is hoping to increase payroll for 2027. Tom Pohlad said, I'm not hoping, it will be higher. I've been consistent, right? For us to accomplish the things we want to accomplish and be a consistently competitive team in the playoffs and going deep, we have to make an investment into this team. We did that in a small way at the trade deadline, and you'll see more of it next year. Now, that is a breath of fresh air, if, of course, it turns out to be true, and actions will mean more than words. But if Tom Pohlad can be a guy that follows through on the words, and to his credit, at the trade deadline, at the beginning of the year, he said if at the trade deadline this team is within playoff striking distance, he wants them to buy. And the Twins did that, and he wrote off, he gave the go-ahead for that to happen. So we have one instance of him following through on his word. But now we have an even better concrete promise that he has made to the team that we can hold him to, that if we suddenly do not make any moves in free agency and do not increase the payroll, we can point to this moment and say, you said outright that you are not hoping that the payroll will be higher. You are saying it will be higher. You said earlier that you need to make an investment of the team, and what we do in the offseason will be even more than what we did at the trade deadline. It is something to hold his feet to the fire if he tries, like we've seen the Pohlad family so many times do before, try to wriggle his way out of those words. That is going to be much harder to do now after he made that statement, and he knows that. So I think that we are in a little bit of a better place here moving forward. But again, we will see what it looks like at the trade deadline, during the offseason, because we've already seen him follow through on his words at the trade deadline. Let's see if he is able to follow through on his words for free agency, and that should make the team a little bit more competitive, and it gives you some peace of mind understanding that at least this Pohlad knows that in order to win baseball games and in order to make a profit, you need to invest in the team, whereas the other Pohlads that have run this team prior have used the Twins more as their pocketbook to get some spare cash every once in a while when they go $400 million in debt on terrible business decisions. So maybe Tom Pohlad, having been removed from that situation a little bit more during his life and being removed from maybe the family a little bit more, has a different perspective and view of how to run the baseball team. And if that is the case, then we can start to forgive not the whole Pohlad family, but forgive the current ownership group of the Pohlads for any naysaying that we have done against them. All right, moving on from that, Derek Shelton talked a little bit before the game about the plan of how to use Jeff Hoffman, the relief pitcher, the high leverage guy that the Minnesota Twins brought in, the former closer of the Toronto Blue Jays. And Derek Shelton says that the plan right now is that he is going to be used as a stopper sort of player, the guy that is going to come in at the moments where the leverage is the highest. He's going to use him in a versatile role. It's not just going to be perhaps a 9th inning role, an 8th inning role, but if you are up by 1 and the bases are loaded with 1 out in the 6th inning, it might be Jeff Hoffman time. We will see just specifically how versatile that role is and if it is only these high leverage situations, but I am excited for that. You might remember the Cleveland, at the time, Indians of the 2016 squad that went all the way to the World Series. They used Andrew Miller in a similar way, and Andrew Miller was one of the most electric relievers we've seen during a postseason run. He would come in and he would shut down teams when the leverage was highest, and then his offense would score a couple more runs so that the rest of this relievers came into lower leverage situations. That's what you're hoping for now with Jeff Hoffman in that role. You want him to be the Andrew Miller of this Minnesota Twins bullpen, and as far as the plan for Andres Gomez, it seems like he is going to still be the closer, or if we're still using the analogy of the 2016 Cleveland Guardians, it would be him being the Brian Shaw as long as he is available. They realize that both him and Andrew Morris have been overworked, especially as of late, and now bringing in AJ Minter and Jeff Hoffman should help take some of that high leverage work off of their plate. But the plan is that if Yoendris Gomez is available to pitch, which he decides typically before the game, or even if he's not publicly announcing it, at least having it in his mind, if Yoendris Gomez is available to pitch, he will have the closer role. And Jeff Hoffman will be this high leverage guy that helps get the game to Yoendris Gomez and Andrew Morris as the other high leverage arms. So I like that. I said I would love to see him be either the lockdown closer or a role that is just important in being the stopper, and he is going to be the stopper. A move to bring Jeff Hoffman up to the big league roster was to option Kendry Rojas to AAA, which at first glance I was a little bit upset about, because if you know anything about the Twinkie Town Tavern, you know how big of a fan I am of Kendry Rojas and the future that he has for this Minnesota Twins team. But based on what Derek Shelton said about the move, it is that they are looking to stretch Kendry Rojas out. He is really right now not being a part of the rotation, pitching only once every 4 games for about an inning, it seems, and they want to extend that. They want to stretch him out because he is going to be looked at as a starting pitcher, and they want to get him going in this what they do at St. Paul is this 4-for-4 sort of deal, which is not a delicious Wendy's value deal, but it is getting a guy pitching every 4 days, having him go in a game 60 to 65 pitches, and then resting, and then 4 days later 60 to 65 pitches, and then off, and just continuing that and continuing to get your pitcher stretched out so that they can be starters, they can be bullpen guys, but they're ready for whatever role that they are called upon if the Minnesota Twins bring them up to the big leagues. And I think that means, at least hopefully, and maybe this is just me with my Kendry Rojas shaded sunglasses on right now, but it makes me think that he will be the starting pitcher, the number 5 starting pitcher soon for the Minnesota Twins, because Connor Prelip is going to hit his innings limit soon. So you are either going to just not have Connor Prelip at all in any aspect once he hits that innings limit, or you're going to move him to the bullpen fairly soon so that he can continue to pitch in lighter doses and take longer to reach that innings limit, because his innings limit, as it has been reported, is 120 innings this season, and that is combined between minors and the major leagues, and between the minors and the major leagues, he is at 96.2 innings of work of that 120 innings pitched. So our math would tell us that's about 24 1/3, 23 2/3 innings of work around there left to go. That's only 3 to 4 more starts, or if you want to use him as a relief pitcher, you could probably stretch him out all the way to the end of the season. But I think Kendry Rojas and his stay at AAA will be short-lived, and it is solely for the purpose of getting him stretched out and ready to be the number 5 starter for your Minnesota Twins come the final 5 to 6 weeks of the season. But today, the starting pitcher is going to be your guy, Dean Kramer, the new guy making his debut for the Minnesota Twins. He will pitch for the first time since the Twins acquired him last weekend. He is a right-handed pitcher with a 1-4 record and a 6.50 ERA in 8 starts. But as we talked about earlier in the week, he is a guy over the last 3 seasons has had pretty low variance among his ERA at the end of the season, being right in that low 4 range. So excited to see if he can go on a little bit of a run, to see what kinks that Pete Mackey and company have worked out as he gets the start against the Kansas City Royals in Game 2 of their series in Kansas City today. The Royals will go with Noah Cameron, who has dominated Minnesota in all 3 of the starts that he's gone against the Twins, including carrying a no-hitter into the 7th inning in the last time out. And the only reason the Twins won that game, of course, was that ultimate grand slam by Cody Clemens with 2 outs. And that was not against Noah Cameron, but that was against the Royals bullpen. So hopefully 4th time is the charm for this Minnesota Twins offense against Noah Cameron. He is 5-8 with a 4.89 ERA. That game has its first pitch scheduled for 6:40 p.m. Central Time. And that is going to be the last call for Twins Talk today. Thanks for pulling up a stool and joining the conversation at the Twinkie Town Tavern. We'll see you back here after the next one. Go Twins.